Good morning, everyone. It's still morning over here, where we are. And Mark, I think it's morning there too, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, awesome. Well, we are just waiting just a couple of moments, allowing some folks to filter into the chat. And while you wait, please enjoy this starting slide here, and you can get excited for today's industry chat. Okay. Well, so with that, my name is Jenna Quinn, and it is my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement to welcome you all to this edition of the 49er Industry Chat Series. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Just want to let everyone here know that this session is being recorded. And so really what that means for you is that this will be available for you to view again or share with a friend or colleague or anyone else who you might think might get something out of this today. And that will be available to you on demand on our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni. For anyone here live today, this is a webinar format, so I encourage all of you to use that Q&A box down there at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for our guest speaker today. And with that, I am so happy to welcome our guest speaker today, Mark Takayesu. How are you doing, Mark?
Doing good. How are
Awesome.
you?
Yeah, doing great. Excited for the chat today and excited to read your bio. So I'll get right into that. Mark graduated from CSULB with a BA and an MA in psychology. His research career began at CSULB as a graduate student in the field of aging and cognition. After graduating, his roles included being both an analyst and manager in the private sector and county government. He is currently enjoying a successful career in New Zealand as a principal analyst for the Ministry of Ethnic Communities. Mark will speak about lessons learned along the way and how to have a successful career in analytics. Thank you, Mark, and I'll turn it right on over to you.
Okay, great. So I'll begin by sharing my screen and I can get started. Okay, so can
Looks
you see that? Is that
perfect.
all?
Yep.
All right. All right, so I'll get started here. So what I'm going to do is have about 10 or 11 slides. And what I'm going to do is just focus on some of the highlights of my career. I'm not going to make this about a journey of my career, but more of some lessons I've learned along the way and some things that I think may be beneficial for students. You're going to hear some maybe anecdotes from professors of what they told me, or some experience I had, or some situation I encountered at school or work. But I think it will be good just to look talk from that perspective. That might be helpful for you. So before I actually begin, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my career. So my career actually started in CSULB as a psych major, and some of the skills that I've learned was things like research in cognition, learning, and aging, SAS software skills, which is the computer language programming, and networking opportunities, which was really beneficial for me with working with other professors and students during my both my actually my MA and my BA work. Uh, then I went on to my first career job, which was a small company called Core Incorporated, which dealt with healthcare and disability management. I was there for about 10 years, and it was my first job out of school. And I can explain some of the challenges and some of the successes of that. Uh, then I went on to work for a call center, at Pacific Care. Pacific Care is an HMO back then in Cypress, California, and it was a very fast-moving, considered like a factory, and how to deal with call center issues and how to get people to do great customer service. So I'll talk a little bit about some of that, some of those situations and some of my experience in there. And then I went on to a career in county government, which is the Orange County Department of Child Support Services as a manager. I've been there, and then I've been there for about 11 years. And I would say that was a significant launching pad to my trip to New Zealand, and which I'll explain. So um, it was from that research that I got invited to come to New Zealand, um, and work in child support at Inland Revenue, which is equivalent to Orange County Child Support Department, but it was actually Inland Revenue represents child support for the entire country. Um, and then I went on work for the Ministry of Education, actually during COVID-19. So I want to explain a little bit about that. And then finally, my career at the Industry for Ethnic Communities, which actually concentrates on diversity and inclusion of people of Asian background, born in continental European, African, Middle East, and Latin American. So we have a community of those folks in New Zealand. A lot of them are migrants, and so research is focused on that. Okay, so I'll start with my CSULB career. I was actually not in CSULB from the start. I was actually a music major, majoring in viola performance at the University of Southern California. But in that situation, I've only lasted about 6 months at USC, and I can tell you that it wasn't cut out. I first started at USC, but it was tough. It was tough for me because I found out that my skills as far as playing my instrument wasn't at the favor of some of the professors over there. Even though I auditioned and I got in, blah, 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 the professor that I work with didn't think I actually belonged there. So it was actually quite a shock. So that was my first experience in college, and to be told that you're not good enough was somewhat of a shocking thing that I had to go through, especially if you've been practicing your instrument for like 12 years, and then this is all you wanted to do, and then you have a professor just kind of knock you down. But I brought myself up, and then I applied to CSULB. And at that time, I was so freaked out about not being successful. I took this class called this College Success Seminar, and it was a class on how to study, basically. Uh, and I took that class in my first semester. I aced the semester, and I, got rid of all my fears. I can do college, so I'm going to continue with that. Um, but one of the beneficial things of being at CSULB was I was part of this program called the Minority Access to Research Careers, which was a program to help undergraduate students hook up with psychology professors on their research project. And at that time, um, they paid for a stipend, I would say, so I didn't have to work and go to school at the same time. And at the same time, I was able to work with, concentrate on research projects with particular professors that they hooked you up with. And as a result, I produced an honors thesis on semantic processing in times in dyslexic adults, which was really great. Um, then I entered the master's program in psychology. And yeah, my thesis was about older adults in expository prose, basically writing ability. Uh, but I would just tell you, during my entire time at CSULB, I think there are two pieces of advice that professors uh, provided me to this day. One was those who make good researchers stay behind and do the dishes. It's kind of a weird thing because when I started in research, I think my first experience at CSULB working with a professor was, oh, can you check the averages or check a list of numbers and calculate the means with the calculator? Um, and I was going in every single day for like an entire summer just doing that. And I was thinking to myself, I just I don't know. I was telling my professor, I don't know if I'm being productive or this is the right career for me because all I'm being doing is just like getting on a calculator every day and checking these. And she sat me down, and this is what she said. And so it was advice that I actually taken that sometimes you need to do the grunge work to get good results. And from that point on, I carried that through my entire career. Um, Also, as an undergraduate, I was sort of paranoid and thinking, I got a psychology degree in a bachelor's, and I'm thinking to myself, what the heck am I going to do with that? What if I have bills? What if I have to pay rent? What if I don't get a job? So one of the professors, and I think he's still there, his name is Jerry Hanley uh, from the psych department, said, it's really your quantitative skills that will get you the job. It's not so much of the degree, but it's the type of electives you choose. So at that point, as an undergraduate, I chose taking a lot of SAS courses. I took computers processing courses and things like that, and that actually led me working with a professor, and that professor knew somebody who um, worked for a company, and that company looking for someone who knew SAS, and that's actually how I got my first job. And that first job was at Core Incorporated, which was just a small consulting firm, and they did some healthcare research looking at mental health and disability for major U.S. auto manufacturers such as Ford and Chrysler and things like that. And I was one of four people there. Uh, and I was new. But the one thing, the several things that I learned was that, I'm just out of school, just got my master's degree. Sometimes you want to go in there and you want to make a good impression. You want to show people what you learn. But then what I realized is that I became a student of what they were doing. So some people been working with SAS and some people working with their clients for 10 years. And so I actually had to learn from them, and that was actually very beneficial because there are two people in that company who were SAS programmers who've been working with this analytics for that long, and they taught me everything. They actually taught me quite a bit about coding, about what the client's looking for, how to transform the data into answers that they're looking for. Uh, and so along the way, and it took 10 years for this, there were opportunities that came up for advancement. And then eventually I became a manager over there and in charge of some of these really, really major projects. I started traveling to Chrysler Corporation, making presentations. But it did take a while. And I learned about politics in workplaces. I've never encountered that before about you know getting along with people and becoming a team player and things like that. Those are all such valuable lessons that I take with me. So don't as you go through the workplace, I think the biggest thing is just be patient. You got a lot to offer. Sometimes it takes time. I think it took me about 6 months to get going. So until I got recognized for what I do. Um, Then I went into Pacific Care Health Systems, and I had a boss there. And I think that boss was from a manufacturing environment. So in the call center environment, I remember he kept saying on delay, meaning that, his view of analytics is like real estate. If you don't do it quickly and accurately, it's going to lose its value. So you need to produce it now. So all of a sudden, from a researcher, I became like this very quick analytics, problem solution kind of thing. And at that time, we didn't have Power BI dashboards or anything like that. So I learned how to pump out SAS reports quickly and develop my own visualizations. And this is where, you start becoming creative. I became creative and started understanding what workforce demand work being an analyst is all about. So if managers and supervisors in a call center would say things like, we need to improve productivity, uh, we need to answer calls efficiently, we got like, 200 people on the phones, how do we improve performance and things like that. So really it was about looking at their behavior, creating statistics about it and saying, hey, this is the behavior of how you handle calls. Can you improve on them? Things like that. So it was an experience that actually, I still quite remember to this day. Um, but it was about, doing things quickly. It was a wake up call. Uh, okay, so then I went into the Orange County Department of Child Support Services, and this is where I was exposed to the world of government research. So government research is quite different from private. Um, Government is about politics. It's about looking at your services that you provide. Um, it's about showing the value of your agency. So it's all about measuring outcomes. It's about, and child support is about measuring the outcomes to children. Are we increasing our collections? Um, are there certain court actions that are good or not good? Do we need to change policy? So there are there's some really key projects in there, like early intervention. How do we intervene early on customers? How do we improve customer services? Like maybe we want to know uh, the type of customers that pay child support regularly and those who don't. Uh, and these are non-custodial parents, uh, primarily male fathers who owe child support money. So there's a lot of demographic research that I got exposed to and changing behavior. So they're always interested in making improvements. Uh, so, what did I learn? I learned about analytics and government professionals, what they can do to understand to make decisions. Um, this is where I got to the point of, if you look at some ads for jobs for researchers, one of the things that they're looking for is, how to explain research to people who are not researchers. And in interviews and job interviews, I get asked that question a lot when I'm applying for a job. And so the trick is how to make it sensible, how to make it intuitive to a government official that, yes, there's an effect of this program on reducing homelessness, for example. Uh, but then at the same time, you have to ensure you have research robust methodology. So you can't you can't explain a regression or that kind of thing to a political or a policy decision maker. You have to tone it down or explain it in such a way that they understand it, to write in concise languages. And at the time as I became the manager, then I learned to strengthen my team's capability as far as those skills are concerned. So this was actually quite an important part of analytics and being a researcher, is to explain things in a very simplified manner. One of the projects that I worked on took about an entire year, um, and it was about how to improve compliance for new customers, and whether the amount that they were charging child support is what was unaffordable. And I won't go into the results of that, but certainly later it's published online. You can look at that. But that project allowed me to go to Germany because as I was presenting this in the United States, this study in the United States, there was a fellow from Germany who says, we really like you to present this at international conference in Germany, um, between I think over 36 countries, um, who's going to present their research. So I said, "Oh, sure," but then, Orange County doesn't pay for international travel. So I took the initiative to pay for my own trip, which I thought was a good move, and just get the permission to take, my time off and then go to Germany. I presented at Germany, and in the slide picture below, the young lady toward the left of your screen, she was from New Zealand. Her name was Paula, and she was on my presentation panel. And then she liked what I was presenting, and then she invited me to come to New Zealand. So that's how I came to New Zealand. So she says, we want to bring over your ideas. I think they're new, um, and want you to work for Inland Revenue. And at that time, it was a 12 months. Actually, no, it was a 2-year secondment, which means that it's a 2-year temporary position. But at that time, I said, "Oh, yeah, I think I'm gonna go anyway. I don't care if it's 2 years. I don't. It's not a full-time job like a permanent position, but I think I'll go." So I went off um, to New Zealand, and there's some pictures that I actually took when I was here, and I've been here for about 8 years, and then and I worked at 3 areas in New Zealand. Inland revenue, which I just mentioned, um, so my goal with there is to look at customer-centric approaches for engaging new child support customers. Then I went on to the Ministry of Education, then Ministry for Ethnic Communities. So at Inland Revenue, I was in the child support area for about 5 years. And I brought all of my knowledge from Orange County into Inland Revenue, and it was pretty well accepted, because I had a lot of good support because I made that initiative to pay for my own trip to Germany. I made my own initiative to do these things all on my own, and that led me to meeting people. That led me to getting a job in New Zealand. So, and in New Zealand, then I had to reset myself because it's a completely different culture. It's a different set of people. Um, People in New Zealand primarily like to work. I mean, they're less. I would say they're less uh, centric on themselves, but they're more like into the group. Uh, Team kind of thinking, uh, approach to work in that kind of manner. So that's where I had a challenge because I had a lot of these ideas, but I had to sort of assert myself in a nice way into their culture to show them that some of the kinds of policies you have may be improved by doing X or doing Y. And here's the data. So I use SAS and I analyzed the data and I said, here's some evidence that shows this is a better approach. Um, Maybe you should try, before the ambulance falls at the bottom of the cliff. Maybe you should try some of these really new things up front to get customers on board so they don't get into child support and they get into debt and all these different kinds of ideas that I had. And I managed to hook up with some people who actually had the data and I was sharing some, methodology that I used, and then I ended up being very successful in implementing a customer-centric approach, meaning that uh, we want to actually talk to customers, help them out in the beginning. And so they actually develop a new training program for that. They developed a new way of interacting with customers, um, and not sort of like ignoring them, but really helping them. So those are the kinds of things that was really beneficial. Bringing your experience from one place and then moving into another place was really, really great opportunity. But then they had a restructure, which basically means that they're going to reorganize the group. And it was out of my control. And the program is still happening, but I decided, hey, it's about time that I work at the Ministry of Education. So I went to with there, and I moved during COVID-19. I moved to Wellington, which is the capital, from Hamilton, New Zealand, which I was living in, to Wellington. And at the Ministry of Education, it was it was an experience I probably will never forget, because I moved during lockdown, and then at the time of the lockdown, I started the job, and they wanted to know how many children were attending school. Um, and at that time, I was brand new. The data wasn't even available. Um, but the minister, who's the political, leader of this area, wanted the results like yesterday. So how do you do that? So, that's where I had to actually put on and work with the data people and work carefully with all the people around the country, to develop these reports, in a very quick manner, uh, putting mock-ups together and then producing these reports, which it's a weekly report that I produced every single week since then. And then it's still going on today, but I'm not there right now. So, but it was an interesting time. And the thing that I learned about that is, the value of, what you do can make a great impact, because all the reports that I produced, for example, were on the news. Um, so for example, if we went, New Zealand went from alert level 4, which is complete lockdown, to level 3 or level 2, which is partial. You can come back to school. They wanted to know how many children were on a daily basis coming back. So, and every time I put that report out, I would drive it to work and I hear it on the news. So it was that critical. And so it's just a lot of experience that I gained through that. And then finally, the ministry, for ethnic communities, is this ministry is the chief advisor to the government on ethnic diversity and inclusion in New Zealand society. And basically, this is the area of research that I started getting into when we talk about things like racism and employment opportunities or employment barriers for people of Asian, African, Middle Eastern, Continental European, these kinds of folks. Because New Zealand is a very diverse society. Um, you have people from all over the world going to school here, attending university, and then gaining employment here. And what the research focuses on really is the strength of diversity. We learn things about, you know, eh, some of these communities very highly educated, but they have some barriers in getting employment. Uh, but they are very, very qualified. And when they do get employment and are qualified and they are in business, I think the contribution to the New Zealand economy, um, is quite high as far as GDP numbers are concerned and things like that. Um, so we've been preparing for things like that, and it's the ministry is only 2 years old, but it's actually um, connecting, and it's doing really well with connecting with other researchers in New Zealand. So basically, throughout all of this stuff, what did I learn? Well, today I'm learning how to collaborate with other ministries and other researchers. I mean, this is the key. Uh, Sometimes your research is your research, and you may have some, you know, um, particular inclination and some revelations and some discoveries you're making, but there are other researchers and other people can help you with that, um, as far as enhancing the field. And then when you collaborate with them, they actually, these kinds of things happen where an opportunity leads to an opportunity and leads to another opportunity. So I would encourage, like collaboration as much as possible, networking as much as possible. Like LinkedIn is a great network platform. And so New Zealand work culture was more about collaboration versus individualism, and that's the big thing that I took away from this. And it took me a while. Um, I think when I first started in New Zealand, for example, I noticed that there are a lot of researchers who wanted or doing the similar things that I was doing. So I was thinking, God, it's just a lot of duplication of work here, So but one of the things that I learned, and I actually told my boss this, was that if you help somebody succeed, like if I, you know, working with, like, say, I know 3 people that are doing the same kind of project that I'm doing. Uh, I was then if I get to the point where I'm going to help them succeed and be successful, then at the same time they will help you succeed. And that's the kind of thing that I learned. And actually, instead of being sort of defensive, I would say, about other people and what they're doing, but once you start collaborating with them, then then you get you actually get benefits from that. And then the other thing is being agile. So, things like restructures happens, job duties change, but you just have to know at the point where when is a good time for a change, and that takes just some experience to learn about that. Is There's no easy answer about that, because you sort of have to weigh what you want to do, um, what you're going to miss, and then what you can do in the future. And if you do start over in a new career, or you start a new job, let's say out of school, you just gonna have to be a little bit patient. It took me about 6 months, to be honest with you, from when you start a job, from when you get out of school, to start getting the motor running, so to speak, get in some kind of rhythm. Because believe it or not, you are the new kid on the block. Uh, if you have a PhD in physics and you're this brilliant person and you start working in this organization, you have other smart people there, and sometimes, you know, you're the new kid on the block, so you just have to be patient, and then listen, look at each other's strengths, and then work with that. So in summary, opportunities will come. When they do, take them as one opportunity leads to another. As you can see through my career, if I didn't do these things, I would never go to Germany. I would never go to New Zealand. I would never do these things. If I didn't pay for my trip to go here and there, my career would probably be in a different path. Then seek support and guidance along the way. This is from your coworkers, um, who know more than you when you first start. And then collaboration is the key to success. And it's really more about selling yourself as value added individual and gaining buy-in for your work. So, uh, when you're a researcher, like in government, for example, um, like in New Zealand today, there's an election, and one of the things about our election, one of the politicians that are is up for election will say, we don't really understand the value of diversity or ethnic communities, and why do we need a ministry to do this when we can have, you know, other people doing the same thing? And so we had to crank out some numbers and showing some value. And that's sort of the theme, I think, of researchers, that they always need to show value of what they do, because the first thing they're going to ask me is, well, where are the results? And so today is the election. And so, they have the Labour Party and the National Party here in New Zealand. The Labour Party basically is the more liberal side, and that's the party that developed this ministry. And then there's other folks who, on the other side, who um, have another solution to that. So, it's a lifelong exercise to sell yourself. And I'll just um, sort of leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was truly a great presentation. I think that that was just full of a ton of exciting things and a ton of exciting experiences. So thank you so much for sharing. If we
Sure.
could take you a little bit of more of your time to go through some questions, and perhaps you can provide some answers. So uh, in here in your presentation and in your journey, right, you kind of have um a pretty intense case of success of networking, right? Like going from Orange County to New Zealand through networking alone. That's quite the jump. That's so impressive, and I think something that's really an exciting thought for a lot of people. Um, and so my question to you would be, what kind of advice for working through it, or what kind of advice would you give to someone who is a little bit apprehensive or fearful of networking, and like not just where they can go out there to network, but also how they can go out there to go network?
Um, that's a good question, because when I was in school, I was basically a shy person. I didn't know how to network, but like I think every person has within themselves a desire to do good, desire to be successful. And so I think, if you just draw in that strength and then seek the people you network who can relate to you. So maybe it's just, start off with a cup of coffee or something, and then you start developing a friendship and things like that. And then you just sort of build on each other. Uh, that does help. I can remember some examples where when I was part of this Minorities Access to Research career program, and I didn't know, and the advisor says, okay, your first job is to meet this professor, um, and ask and just sell yourself and say you want to work with her. And I was just like, what am I gonna do? Walk in her office? So, so I, I knocked on the door, and then her name was Joellen Hartley, by the way. She's retired, but and she looked at me, and I said, I really want to do research with you. And I just kind of said stuff like blurted out like that. And she kind of looked at me and she just says, okay, well, meet me in my office. Here's my office hours and blah, blah, blah. And so, you just have to develop that courage to make that initial contact. But I think, every student, every student is at school for a particular reason. They want to be successful. They don't go there just to, eat at the 49er cafe. I'm sure they're there for a reason, that they want to be there for a reason. So you just find that in yourself, and then work up the courage to actually do that. The professors are great people, because they know people who've graduated, who've got jobs, and sometimes these jobs are contacting these professors and asking about, we need we were looking for this kind of particular person to work for us. And that's how I broke through, because if it wasn't for that meeting that professor, I wouldn't have gotten my first job.
Yeah, awesome. Great advice, and honestly, impressive impressive use case of networking. So thank you. Um, so in your current job, I think it's really exciting for a lot of our students to see that there are opportunities out there to work in that diversity, equity, and inclusion space. So would you mind telling us a little bit more about, what does the day-to-day look like, and what does that type of work look like and feel like to be in every day?
Okay, so it's a small ministry of probably about 60 people. And one of the biggest things that I'm looking for is the existence of data on ethnicity, which is difficult to find because it's not been collected. And so I seek out data from other departments. When I walk into work, I go and look at things like Ministry of Social Development, or Ministry of Education and things like that. I talk to these people and I say, do you have data on um, the MILA, which is the Latin America, Middle East, those types of communities. And so we're just sort of in this data gathering stage, building up our database, so to speak. But then we find these nuggets of results. So, for example, when we at a recent conference, we were presenting results on the contribution of Asian communities to New Zealand businesses, and the contribution of there's certain groups like Latin America and Middle East who actually are immigrant groups, or they're very new groups here. And so they have a hard time adjusting to society. They take a little bit longer, but they have these technical degrees. And so when we see people with all this capability but have a difficulty getting a job, or the pay gap, we were looking at pay gap work, is such a disparity. That's where we take that research and we try to influence policy. So, like, there's pay gap. There's the women pay gap. There's a pay gap between, let's say, we call the European versus the Asian, and especially Asian women who make lower than European women. So we look at these pay gaps, and that's a big area of research here, and then try to address that in such a way and publish it so that it gets recognized. And then there are other researchers who do pay gap researchers that we also collaborate with. So we constantly are talking with them and trying to see what we can do to change and we this the policy. In fact, we just had a recent conference, a research what they call research hui, which is a Maori word for like a gathering. And in that conference, we have presenters who all across New Zealand who are presenting research in ethnic communities, explaining about things like what's successful. Um, a lot of talk about racism in schooling too, as bullying and things like that. So we're involved in a lot of things where we're trying to change the system. So that's my day to day, just trying to find the data.
Yeah, no, I mean that in itself is a huge challenge. I think that any researcher would say, right?
Yeah.
Well, as we're coming up on time, final question that I always like to ask. If there was one piece of advice that you could give to yourself, if you could go back in time and talk to you as you were coming out of CSULB, there's one piece of advice that you could give, what would it be?
I would say don't be afraid. You don't have nothing to fear. And if you have an opportunity, just go for it. Uh, thinking about when I was a music student and the reason why I quit, I would say that word. I literally quit. But if I go back in time and think, well, if I stuck it out at the University of Southern California and just stuck it out that music major, I think my path would be a lot different. So if I was to tell my younger self what to do, I would say just don't quit. Don't worry about what this professor says. Just keep going. And maybe I would have been a famous musician by now and not all this research stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, no one knows. But I think that's a great piece of advice. You know, don't be afraid. Don't listen to what other people are saying if it doesn't serve you. So yeah, no, I think that's awesome. Thank you so much, Mark, for your entire journey, for sharing your journey with us, for your great insights, and then for being part of our 49er Industry Chat series. Um, yeah, and so for all of you who are tuned in and watching this, if you want to see this video again or share it with anyone, you can find it on our website again at www.csulb.edu/alumni. You can also find other things that we're doing, other programs that we're offering. So definitely check it out and follow us on social media. It's also a great place to see, the different things we're doing here in alumni. And Mark, if people wanted to check in with you and maybe continue the conversation or ask any questions or do that networking, how might they be able to get in contact with you?
Sure, just type in my first and last name in LinkedIn, and I'm there. Feel free to connect with me. Send me an instant message through LinkedIn. That's probably the best.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mark, and hang on back while we sign off here on the 49er Industry Chat series. Bye, everybody.
Okay, thank you.